Alright, so today we're looking at adding and subtracting vectors. So the learning intention is to gain the knowledge of performing mathematical operations with vectors. We can be successful if we can, at the end of this lesson, be able to add two vectors and subtract two vectors, describe the parallelogram law of addition, and describe and use the zero vector. Okay. So remember, a vector is a quantity that has both size and direction, so a length and direction. So if we have two vectors, they can be added together by placing them tip to tail. So these are displacement vectors. They're anywhere in the plane. So I have the vector here of D to E, and we're going to call that vector B. And we're going to try to add it to vector AB. And we're going to call that A. Okay. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to position the vectors from tip to tail. So this is, okay, so there's my vector. I'm going to redraw my vector DE. And I'm going to then draw my vector AB. Okay, so obviously the starting point is called the tail, and then the arrow point is called the tip. So I've placed them tip to tail. So what I'm going to do is then I'm going to add these vectors, and what it is, it starts from the tail of the first vector to the tip of the last vector. So what I'm doing is I'm going to add this part. So this becomes B plus A. Yep, and I can write that. So DB, which is B plus A. Okay, now obviously if I wanted to do A plus B, I would then put my A vector, which was 3 units, so this is AB. Okay, what's going to happen is then I'm going to put that my second vector tail to tip, so 1, 2, it was 2 units, and that was DE, because remember the displacement, so they can move anywhere on the plane as long as they're parallel. And so what's going to happen is now I'm going to have this vector here from A to E. Okay, and that's going to be A plus B. So in this situation, the vector AB plus the vector DE gave me the vector AE, or the vector A plus the vector B gave me the vector of A plus B. Okay, so when adding vectors, we're going tip to tail. And this example kind of starts me with the parallelogram law. Okay, if I have two vectors, such as this one, A and B, so let's say they start at the same point, and they're adding, they're going away, and I want to add them. What I really need to do is I need to move one of these vectors, because they're both tip tails, they're coming from the inside. I need to move it so that the tail becomes next to the tip. Alright, so let's say I move this vector. I think I made it 2 units as well. Okay, so I've actually moved this vector so it's over here, and then what I would get is the sum would get actually that vector there. okay, which would be A plus B. Okay, so if I was to continue and let me say I'll draw a parallelogram. Let's say I labeled it A, B, C, D. Okay. In this sense, the vector of CB plus CD gave me CA. Okay, and that's that's an important one to know. Yeah, same thing would happen here. I could have the vector of DC plus DA. Yeah, and if I had that, the vector actually would be DB. Because if I'm adding these two vectors, if they're going away from each other, just say I'll put it there, I'd move that over here, and it would add them, it would give me that vector DB. Okay, so just be aware of that. All right, let's do subtracting vectors. Okay, so now here I have vector A and I have a vector B. Now they're both going from tip to tail, tip on the outside and tail on the inside. What I want to do, if I want to subtract them, or if I actually want to add them, yeah, I need to reverse my vector B. And to do that, it then become a negative B. Okay, so if I do my A, and I think it was 2 units. Okay, so I'm going to try to add these two vectors, so subtract these two vectors. Oops. Yeah, remember B is actually facing inwards, I would get A minus B. Yeah, because I've flipped it around to make it a negative, and so I get A minus B, and that gives me that vector here. Okay. Now, the zero vector. The zero vector happens if I have a vector going one way. Remember, if I want to change its direction, all I have to do is make it into a negative. Yeah, to change the direction, I might write that down. So, to change a vector's direction, it's the negative of the original. So if I add those two vectors together, A minus A, what happens is I get a zero vector. I basically start at the same point that I left from. Yeah, so I finish the same point that I left from. So subtracting vectors. So remember, this is also the parallelogram idea. So if I have two vectors going outwards, what I want to do if I'm going to make that, if I flip this sign, so make it negative B, it will face this way. Okay, and that's going to be negative B plus A, which is A vector minus B vector. Yeah. Alternatively, I could have flipped this one and have B minus A. Yeah. So maybe I'll do that. So, oops. So if I flipped it, so that was the arrowhead was facing there, I would get B minus A. Yeah, minus A plus B. Okay. So the same thing if you had a parallelogram. A, B, C, D. Okay. And let's say this, so if we have DC and BC, so DC minus BC, yeah, so it's going from B to C. So what I want to do is flip it. That's going to give you DB. Okay. So let's look at this example here. So given the parallelogram W, X, Y, and Z, I'll do it in pencil. I've got WX, so I'm going this way, and then I'm adding XY, I'm going that way, so tip to tail, tip to tail. I'm going to get WY as the result, the vector WY. Alright. Part B, if I get YZ, so I'm going this way, and I add ZW, so tip, tail, I'm going to get YW. Okay. So here I'm still going WX, and now I'm going to subtract WY. So WY is going this way, okay? I'm going the opposite way, which is going this way. Yeah, so what I have is tip to tail, then my solution is going to be Y to X. And the last one, I'm going to Z to W, I'm going this way. And I'm going to subtract Z to X. So that's the way I was going. So all of a sudden I'm going to subtract, so it's going to be the opposite way. So I'm going that way. So tip to tail, I'm going to get X to W. Okay. Let's write these vectors, the vector C, in terms of A and B. So here it is, tip to tail. So what this is going to be is the vector C is actually A plus B, going from tip to tail, tip to tail, tip to tail. All right. Here we've got C, and this is, so the C vector is going to be B plus A. All right. Here, C vector is going to be the A vector, tip to tail, and what I want to do is reverse the B, so that's going to be minus B. Okay, and that's it for today. Thank you very much.